Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
And welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice, here to talk about the greatest band on the face of the planet. It's subjective, but you know it's true. Depeche Mode. It's Depeche Mode, the podcast. I wish that I had news to share, but I don't. Things continue to be quiet from the Depeche Mode camp, although I have seen online several individuals that have seen either Martin or Dave around their respective homes as of late, but alas, no details about unreleased, fully produced tracks or the physical release of the Memento Mori tour. But remember, when that information does drop, rumor or otherwise, I will be sure to report it straight away here on the podcast. This week, I may need some help from you with this. So I went hunting around to try to find a topic for this week. And if you missed my conversation with Rob Rom last week from the Global Depeche fan group, and I've been saying his name wrong this whole time, and I still feel bad about that. I'm saying Rome, it's Rom. Rob Rom. Be sure you check out the podcast from last week. Really enjoyed that conversation, and we'll certainly go and invite him back on again. But I was doing a little digging over what are arguably the most popular albums by the band. And this goes back to what I've called the trilogy, but we'll expand upon it further. Black Celebration, Music for the Masses, Violator, Songs of Faith and Devotion. Yes, I know that it is all subjective, and some of you might have albums that you like more than those four that I mentioned. But generally speaking, this is the trajectory of the band as they began to rise in their prominence to stardom and their peak as they continued on to make albums all these years. What I have here in front of me are interesting details, trivia about the albums, Black Celebration, Music for the Masses, Violator, and Songs of Faith and Devotion. Now, a lot of this I was already aware of. Some of this I was not aware of. And some of it, I'm not 100% sure is true. So this is where I will go and default to you, those who are even more educated within some of the finer details of Depeche Mode's back catalog than I am. Needless to say, this is rather interesting trivia that I felt was worthy to share with you on this week's show. So let's get to it. So we'll start off with Black Celebration. And again, some things that I was aware of and some things that I wasn't or had only recently learned. So the voice that you hear at the beginning of Black Celebration is Daniel Miller saying a brief period of rejoicing. Black Celebration. In the first part, a brief period of rejoicing, Miller plays Winston Churchill in a phrase that he uttered during World War II. In concerts, that part is heard at the end of the song. Now, again, I invite you listening to send me corrections, any statements on here that might be wrong. I am more than happy to make those corrections on the next show. I did not write this list. I happen to find it online. The long version of Stripped was actually made by Mark Ellis, who also goes by the name of Flood. He, of course, would go on to later produce Violator in 99 and Songs of Faith and Devotion in 93. The song Black Day was composed by Martin, Alan Wilder, and Daniel Miller. It is the only time that Miller collaborated in the group composing. I always appreciated Black Day. Just because I liked the fact that it was this Black Celebration adjacent track. I just thought that was something that was so unique at the time, hearing it. It wasn't a remix. There were, new vocals recorded for this track, new instrumentation, but it, lifted from the lyrics of Black Celebration. I just always thought that was really interesting. In the American version of the album, A Question of Time was badly mastered. So the beginning effect is repeated. I would love to get clarity on that, because I know exactly what they're talking about on the American version of A Question of Time, and that little effect that takes place at the beginning. Whether or not this was because it was badly mastered, I'd like to get confirmation on. So these are more of sort of obvious things that you and I know from listening to the album, but the first three songs, Black Celebration, Fly on the Windscreen, A Question of Lust, are continuous with each other as if they were a single piece of the album. The same thing happens with A Question of Time, Stripped, Here is a House and World Full of Nothing. This is one aspect of the streaming age and even CDs that I don't like. I know it's not quite as bad on CDs, but I miss the days when you didn't get that gap between the tracks. You know, I like being able to hear it in its consistency, whether it's on cassette or vinyl. When you have those, how it's more of a concept where the songs flow into one another and there's no break in the soundscape. The song Fly on the Windscreen has been produced, or was produced, in 1985. The members of the group considered it so good that they ended up making the new mix to include on Black Celebration. Absolutely aware of this. The string sampler of Here is the House is the recording of a guitar running backwards. One of my favorite Depeche Mode songs. I was unaware of that little fact. The song Sometimes has never been performed live. I'd like to get confirmation on that one. It is the album that has more songs sung by Martin Gore. But Not Tonight is the song that took longer to make its appearance in concerts, not until 2013 during the Delta Machine tour, 27 years after its publication. Alan Wilder didn't have the chance to interpret it live. Again, I didn't write these. I'd love to hear feedback from you, though. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. All right, we move over to Music for the Masses. In the video for Never Let Me Down Again, Dave Gahan drives a BMW Isetta. I actually saw one of those the other day. It was really funny. I went over to a Home Depot, and while it wasn't that exact model, I pulled up in the parking lot, and there was a car incredibly similar. The one that I saw in the parking lot was bright red. It was incredibly similar to the one that Dave drives in Never Let Me Down Again. The songs Never Let Me Down Again, The Things You Said, are continuous with each other. Strange Love, Sacred as well. Lastly, I Want You Now, To Have and To Hold and Nothing are also continuous with each other. Again, just more observations that you already know. During the tour, the song Never Turn Your Back on Mother Earth, original of the North American duet Sparks, was included in the concerts. I'd love to get some backstory on that, too. Because obviously it wasn't in the 101 show. But I don't think I recall ever hearing the version of that live. Although I quite enjoyed that song. That time period when Counterfeit came out was so interesting. One, when the album was first released, Martin Gore's solo album, I was not aware at the onset that it was covers. So I just wasn't really paying that close of attention. Martin Gore was releasing a solo album. I was in love with Depeche Mode, as I continued to be, so I got it, really enjoyed it. Technically, it sounded not too far removed from Depeche Mode, and over a relatively short period of time, I came to discover that, these are all covers. Martin didn't write these songs. Little 15 was the only single after 1986 that was included in the 1991 singles boxes 1 through 3 collection. I just recently had come across that piece of information. I don't remember where, though. This is something that I also only recently heard about prior to seeing this particular list. The voice that is heard at the beginning of To Have and To Hold in Russian means the evolution of the nuclear arsenal and the socio-psychological problems of the armed race are considered in the reports. There you go. The song To Have and To Hold has also never been performed live. The song Pleasure Little Treasure, included only in the CD edition of the album, is in its glitter mix version, although it does not appear accredited as such. And that whole thing falls under questions if I ever get the opportunity to ask the band. I would love to get a little bit more backstory on the inclusion of Pleasure Little Treasure later on in the CD edition of the album. The band goes to such lengths to carefully craft the order in which the songs appear on the album. I often wonder when the CD gets released and suddenly there is another track that's included on there, how that happens and whether or not that is a direct decision made by the band or whether or not that is something that was done almost exclusively by the label. I meant to mention this recently on a show. I was actually texting with my friend Matt. I sent him this video. The Professor of Rock on YouTube, really great YouTube channel if you just like rock in general. He did one not too long ago on music for the masses. 80s album title was a big joke until it happened. Iconic Band's 1987 album title was just a big joke until it came true. And in it, he goes and talks about music for the masses and provides a lot of interesting details that I was completely unaware of. One of the details was relating to Have It to Hold, and I had never heard this before. So I sent this video to Matt, and he replied, and it has the details of the song and what took place in his reply to me. He said this was great, really underscored how much Alan contributed to the band. The difference between Alan's version of To Have and to Hold and Martin's Spanish taster mix is incredible. Alan brought dark and moody atmospheres to DM that took them to another level, made them untouchable and cult-worthy. Miss you so much, Alan. So I didn't realize that the Spanish taster mix of To Have and to Hold that I believe was included on the CD version as well. I could be wrong on that. Be that as it may. The Spanish taster mix, which has a more electronic, funky vibe as opposed to the album version of To Have and to Hold, was actually Martin's version for the album. And they were wrestling back and forth with which version of To Have and to Hold they were included on the album. And they ended up going with Alan's version, which I think fits the mood, and I agree with Matt, fits the mood on music for the masses better than the Spanish taster version, which I absolutely also enjoy. But I was just unaware of this sort of dispute going on between these two versions, one being specifically Martin's and the other one being Alan's. All right, let's move over to Violator. The album contains 2 instrumental tracks. A lot of people know this. I didn't realize the succession here because they seem to follow Violator and Songs of Faith and Devotion. So, interlude number 2, Crucified. You can hear the voice of Andy saying Crucified. Now, the other one is after Blue Dress, and it's simply called interlude number 3. Both are not accredited on the disc. The last 2 songs, Blue Dress and Clean, are continuous with each other. Actually, both are linked, taking into account interlude number 3, so there are 3 songs presented as one. Again, more of an obvious thing when you listen to the record than, so any sort of trivia that you wouldn't be aware of. The full name of Waiting for the Night is Waiting for the Night to Fall. It is assumed that by a printing error, that was the name printed limited, although Alan Wilder stated on his website that this was not true. When the song Personal Jesus was released in its 12-inch edition, it became the best-selling single in the history of Warner Music for North America. That's pretty well known by everybody. Getting to Songs of Faith and Devotion. The album contains 1 instrumental track after Get Right With Me called Interlude Number 4, and it is not accredited on the disc. Now, I got an issue with that. I'll get to in a second because I made a note to this. The songs Mercy in You and Judas are continuous with each other. The same thing happens with Get Right With Me and Rush. So my understanding is it might be called interlude number 4, but that music after Get Right With Me, before you roll into Rush, is a mix of I Feel You before Rush begins. And I believe that mix was released on the first CD release of the single for I Feel You. Again, it reminds me a little bit of Black Day and sort of the relationship between Black Day and Black Celebration, although I'm fairly certain, and I'm getting the feeling I'm going to get inundated with emails this week, talkshownerd@gmail.com. I'm pretty sure that was music lifted directly from deep inside the mix of I Feel You. It may be They say it's called Interlude number 4, but I've never heard that before. So any clarity you can provide on that would be welcome. Songs of Faith and Devotion is the only DM album to have its full complete live version. In addition to that, the devotional concert was also published in video format. Of course, you're aware of that as well. And my understanding in reading the Monument book is that the reason why they released the live version was because they could keep Songs of Faith and Devotion in its title trending on the charts by going and releasing a live version of it as well. In Europe, a special box of Songs of Faith and Devotion was released. It contains Songs of Faith and Devotion, the live version, the 1985 compilation 81 through 85, and in some countries, the album, and a promotional compilation of D Pro number 1 CD with the singles from the group from 86 to 93. In some countries, the album did not appear until 1984. I will say that going through the Monument book, and I'd have to go and do kind of a deep dive into it, but my takeaway from Monument was that Songs of Faith and Devotion had the widest array of promotional items attached to it in terms of box sets, tchotchkes, things like candles and necklaces and just promotional items. It would make sense considering how popular Violator was, and this being the follow-up to Violator and the label wanting to take advantage of the band's popularity, that they would go out of their way to produce an abundance of promotional items to coincide with its release. It reminds me a little bit, relating to my own personal fandom and the other podcasts that I do for my nerd world, that being Star Wars, of how they weren't prepared for the popularity of the film, so much so that they didn't have toys ready for the holiday season, and this brought about the infamous empty box campaign, where you could buy the empty box for your kids that would produce a display that you would put the action figures on when they were made the following year, and that display would have a picture of what the action figures would look like. And then, of course, when you get through the original trilogy, the immense popularity of Star Wars, and the prequels come out, they produce just mass amounts of Star Wars toys relating to the Phantom Menace, to the point where it was overkill. What I'm describing here with Depeche Mode on a much smaller level, but the theory rings the same. Meaning, Violator was hugely popular, let's take advantage of it and make a lot of promotional items for Songs of Faith and Devotion. I remember having, I loved this thing. It was a necklace. It was a metal necklace, flimsy metal. But it was a flimsy metal necklace of one of the symbols that was used on the album cover. All 4 members of the band had created those symbols on the album cover. Those were recreated in those, those huge, gigantic monuments that hung on stage during the devotional tour. I had a necklace of one of those. It was the outline of and I think it might have been Dave's artwork that created it. Loved that thing right up until it broke. Wah, wah. Very disappointed when that happened. All right, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. So, I'm looking forward to more trivia from you. Feel free to share any you'd like and correct anything that I've mentioned here. I'm expecting that I'm going to get a lot. All right, let's get to your listener feedback. Just a couple of items this week. You guys have been quiet. Hello, John. The DM podcast never lets us down. The chat with Rob Rom was very enjoyable. I hope you can have him on again. I absolutely will. I think you could also invite Von George for a chat. He's recently dedicated a YouTube channel to all of his DM-related content, and maybe he'd be interested in promoting it. That is a great idea. I enjoy Von George's videos quite a bit. Keep up the great work, Christian. Thank you very much, Christian. I appreciate that. David Stedman writes, always enjoy listening to the show. Been a DM fan since 1986 when a friend of mine introduced me to Black Celebration and also the singles collection 81 through 85. It wasn't until I heard the singles compilation that I realized how many of their songs I'd already known and how much I liked them. I've only got to see them live twice, Wembley Arena in 1990 on the Violation Tour and the Crystal Palace in 1983 on the Devotional Tour. I think we will get more music from them in the future, but not so sure they'll be on a large tour again. Age and time away from the families being the most likely factors in my opinion. Hopefully, they'll still play a small number of dates following any new music, so most of us can see them again via a screen. Keep up the good work, David, Manchester, UK. Thank you so much, David, as always. If you want to email, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment up on YouTube as well, especially if you want to correct any of my trivia. All right, thank you so much for checking out this episode. Again, if you like Depeche Mode and you also read sci-fi, treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with science fiction set in the future. The EMBARK series is where air and spaceflight culture has replaced car culture in the year 2172. It was inspired in part by Depeche Mode, the world we live in life in general, life in the so-called space age. Depeche Mode plays a part in the underlying themes of the story. The main character himself, Taft Guardia, is a massive Depeche Mode fan at a time when the music of the 80s through the 2000s is nostalgic and popular among the characters of the story. Features references to Depeche Mode, both direct and indirect, while telling an exciting science fiction space opera saga. As Earth faces its end, follow pilots Taft, Katha, and their crew on a journey of survival across the galaxy as they fight for humanity's future. Again, if you like science fiction and you want it to be epic, with a little bit of romance, some cool technology, filled with action, sprinkled in with Depeche Mode, EMBARK is perfect for you. It is written for adults, but it's great for ages 11 plus. Pick up EMBARK Book 1 today. 7 books in all in the series. Available in ebook, Kindle Unlimited for free, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook. And I'll mention, all new covers. All new covers to the EMBARK series, so go and check those out. As always, thank you so much for checking out this show. I'll be back next week. Hopefully we'll have some news to share between now and then. Either way, I hope wherever you are happy, you are healthy, and you are safe. I'll talk to you then. Bye.
Hello, this is Martin